My name is Lawrence Daly. I am a forensic child sexual abuse investigator, interviewer, and educator. The following is going to be a diagram on the investigations and interviewing of an investigative child sexual abuse interview. There will be criteria that I want you to consider when you investigate or interview child sexual abuse allegations. "12 steps to finding the truth in child sexual abuse investigations." Control. The law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator has to establish from receiving the assignment of the investigation that the case is theirs to investigate and to take control of. Once law enforcement child sexual abuse investigators have taken control of the investigation, the question should be, does the investigator have enough freedom and support to ascertain the truth? The law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator must understand that with control comes specific and certain boundaries that they must follow. Generally, these boundaries are outlined in the organization's protocols, procedures, and standard operating procedures. The law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator has control of the investigation, but does he or she have a specific direction in which the investigation needs to be taken? The journey must produce results. Charter. The law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator working in a specialized unit must understand their response and design of their investigation must coincide with their vision, mission, and strategies. The law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator must anticipate the outcome and their contributions to the investigations. The design of the child sexual abuse investigation must produce positive results. The law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator, because of the many methods and techniques of how to communicate within an organization, the confusion should be limited by adhering to a charter. Competence. In the child sexual abuse industry, competence is so important when it comes to the law enforcement child sexual abuse investigators, as the investigation the investigators conduct will affect numerous lives and may take away the freedom from the alleged perpetrator. The law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator needs to have specific competence standards so when the investigator is given their first investigation, they have the skills and knowledge to perform the job. The law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator should capitalize on every lead they receive from the public. The law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator needs to be competent to develop and implement a solid investigative standard which is above reproach. Commitment. A law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator is evaluated for the thorough, complete, and competent their commitment is when investigating an allegation of child sexual abuse. A law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator has to be committed to accomplishing the organization's mission and expectations outcome. Commitment, if given its true value in an organization, should direct the law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator to the level the organization wants from their investigation. If the law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator is committed to being the best investigator for the organization, then they will need to grow in their skills, education, training, and experience. Context. Does the law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator understand why their job and responsibilities are so important? Does the law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator understand where he or she fits in their organization and specialized unit they are assigned to? Does the law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator understand the many investigative strategies which are available within the organizations for assistance and direction? Does the law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator understand his or her work fit in the total context of the organizational goals, principle, vision, and values? Clear expectations. Has the law enforcement administration provided a clear and understanding scientific protocol, procedures, and standard operating procedures? Has the goals of the law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator been clearly outlined for any and all child sexual abuse allegations and investigations? Does the law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator have a partnership with those in the sexual assault unit? Does the law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator find that there is a support system in place for when the managing reactions has lost sight of the ultimate goal, which is the mental and physical health of the investigator? Does the law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator supervisor maintain a consistent and effective methods and techniques for all of the investigators on his or her team? Coordination. Since there are many child sexual abuse professionals working on one child sexual abuse allegation, it is the role and responsibility of the law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator to coordinate the case being put together and submitted to the prosecutor for prosecution. The law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator needs to put themselves in a leadership role from being assigned to the case until they submit the case to the prosecutor. The law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator must evaluate and push for coordination at the sexual assault unit teams to interviewing witnesses and the apprehension of the alleged perpetrator. The law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator must respond to the crime scene, delegate who will process the scene, examine and evaluate the biological and physical evidence, create and implement a case action plan, and how the investigation should be conducted. Cultural change. The law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator will undoubtedly be assigned cases where there is a cultural issue. The internal and external cultural changes can be significant in that the sexual assault unit may be diversified and/or all of the witnesses need interpreters to provide the information they have. Internally, there may be a cultural change in just moving the law enforcement child sexual abuse investigators to different teams. The benefits are to place the investigators on teams where they present a positive approach to the investigations they are assigned. A cultural change can be as simple as encouraging the law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator to seek success. This will occur when the investigator becomes knowledgeable and experienced. Even then, the investigator must take pride in the work they perform. Collaboration. When investigating a child sexual abuse allegation, the law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator needs to collaborate with all the local criminal justice professionals who work in the child abuse industry. Sometimes it is necessary that the law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator ascertains specifically what roles and responsibilities are of the child sexual abuse professionals. The law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator needs to collaborate with other child sexual abuse professionals to identify any problems which need to be solved prior to taking it to the prosecutor for prosecution. The law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator needs to collaborate with the child sexual abuse professionals to always implement new methods and techniques, goal setting, and how to measure the success of each investigation. Communication. Communication occurs at many levels of the child sexual abuse investigation. This communication can be internal or external depending on the task the law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator is responsible for. Communication is a must when dealing with victims, witnesses, and perpetrators. Does the law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator understand the necessity of their roles of the job when communication occurs? The investigator needs to clarify, communicate to all of the child sexual abuse professions what their jobs will be and what their intentions are. Sometimes a well-meaning professional can throw a snag into the investigation, causing irreparable harm to the case. Communication can either be a barrier or a positive opportunity for the law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator during an investigation. Creative innovation. The law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator needs to be creative and innovative when they are investigating an allegation of child sexual abuse. Creative investigations basically are structured to cause change. The question then is the law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator willing to change the way he or she does their investigation. A creative innovation can teach and educate the law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator avenues to new solutions and new ideas. Creative innovation will allow the law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator to receive training and education in the child sexual abuse field. Consequences. When given a child sexual abuse investigation, does the law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator feel responsible for the consequences of the investigation, good or bad? When given rewards and recognition, the law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator's confidence in their skills and success in ascertaining the truth provides positive consequences. There are 6-month and yearly evaluations which law enforcement child sexual abuse investigators receive. The problem with this evaluation system is there are rarely consequences for the actions of the investigator. An evaluation system which specifically deals with short-term consequences needs to be put in place for the law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator. This short-term evaluation system promotes the thorough, complete, and competent investigation. It is rare that the law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator will put in the time to better their knowledge, education, and skills, and there are no consequences for such actions. This could also be called the 12 C's. So when you are dealing with an investigation as a law enforcement child sexual abuse investigator, use these 12 steps as a manner in which to find competency. Thank you.